the evolution of water graphics in video games. Hello and welcome to Gaming My Whole Life. This is the subject matter which I'm actually very interested in. I love water in general. I love it when it rains. I love it in my video games. And what I thought would be really fun to do today is in video games, particularly ever since we entered the 3D era, make sure this is recording, wonderful. Ever since we entered the 3D era, every time we've gotten a new gaming console, we've seen the quality of water drastically jump up to the point which every time I get a new video game, and especially a new video game console, the very first thing I do personally is I check out the water. So having a look on the screen right now, we're starting with the PS1 era, because for me that's when 3D graphics started at home. And this is a picture of the original Tomb Raider, obviously running off an emulator. That's why it's all nice and crisp, but the graphics are the same. So to imitate water in this time was just literally a big 3D square. It was a big 3D square. On the top, none of that water is interactive. It was just painted white lines to mimic reflections and water movement, but nothing was actually happening there. So that's what we started with. And this is a picture of Crash Bandicoot, the first one. Same sort of thing where, instead of a square, if the player wasn't going to jump into it, it would just be a flat plane, sort of like a piece of paper that just happened to either be transparent or, which was typical in the PS1, just painted bumps just to give the illusion. It's like grabbing a painting of water and putting it on the ground. That was pretty much what we did. And this picture of Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver was a good example of the boxed approach. So characters jumped into it. It's just literally a 3D box with a transparent top to enter and some lines to it to give the illusion. So that's where we started. Now, let's see the first jump, and you'll start to understand what I mean by water graphics being the most obvious improvements every time we do a generation jump. So let's leave PS1 and N64 land. Let's go to PS2 and Gamecube land. Now, this is a muggy shot just because it was really hard, but you can still make out what I'm talking about. So you have this character here, right? And you have these ripples. Now, all of this whole box was interactive water. So as the character started here, ran across, moved, and created realistic ripples and little waves which would go in different directions and hit the walls and then go back into each other and crash. So this was a big deal. This was a feature that the PS2 had implemented by default. So I remember this was very impactful. I went from flat planes and a box with painted stuff on it to actual interactive water and splashes. So that was really mind-blowing, right? And then you had games like Super Mario Sunshine on the Gamecube, same era. This was more of an artistic approach, right? But they had actual waves which would go, and it looked back then and still now gorgeous, whereas models like Mario and all that, you could zoom in on them, you noticed that, they were smoother, they were less blocky, they were more smooth, but the water was the thing that was like, pow, like it really stood out, right? And then jumping over to the PS3 and the 360 era, where we left mostly the artistic side and more into the realm of realism, because those consoles could support, obviously much higher meshes and more realistic textures. So this water looks a lot more realistic. Whether it looks better is an artistic opinion you can go for or against. But as far as realism goes, that was the first jump. And then you had other games which went more towards the artistic side, which this is a screenshot of Oblivion on the PS3. Now, it didn't look this bad because the color contrast is really weak. When you played it, it was all bright and colorful, but you had these little waves, you had these, little reflections go in there. I remember it was very impactful on me that when you first play Oblivion, you're in an underground, like sewer dungeon, something or other. Anyway, so you won't see outside for a while, and then you step outside and you see those big mountains and you see this huge body of water with all these reflections on it, and there were little ripples happening in the water, and it just really stood out. My mind at the time was blown. And then jumping again to current consoles, this is where water has really, it's like reached a peak, which I'm interested to see what the next evolution is. This is just a screenshot from Watchdogs 2. Now, on the PS4, on the Xbox One X, and even the Switch, water graphics look amazing. Look how clear that is. They're actual moving waves. You jump into the water and you get splashes and actual ripples. If a boat goes by, they create their own waves. So it's beautiful, it's interactive, it's highly detailed, and and it stands out more because if we go back here, right, you have this very close-up shot of Laura and Tomb Raider, but you can tell it's a bit of a past gen thing, just the way the textures work and so forth. So it doesn't seem like that much of a big deal, right? And yet when we jump here and we have the character here, he doesn't necessarily look much better at all. But the water stands out. The water is the easiest thing to identify extra power. And a game like Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the best water I've seen to date, going around in the ship, seeing those realistic ripples, the transparency, the many different layers and complexities going on in the texture material work is phenomenal. And like I said, even the Switch with the lower hardware, it still has all of the common features. This is Super Mario Odyssey. And I'm really curious to see what will be the next thing. We've all heard the rumors about the PS5 and the next Xbox. I've talked about it on this channel before. How are they going to push things even further with all the extra power? Can they actually do that? Like, is this what we can see here, the pinnacle? Because one could argue, what more do you expect? The water looks good, it's transparent, it's interactive, it's no longer just a flat plane, it's not a box, it's actual water acting like realistic, believable water. What more can you want? I don't know what the answer to that is. I look forward to developers taking it further, because you have to always remember, when we play games, we always think this is the most that developers can think of, right? However, developers are always working with restraints. So from even the PS1 era, developers have like goals up to here, and they'd have to bring it down to actually run on the hardware. And every time, even though that gap has grown, they always still have to behave. This water in Assassin's Creed Odyssey is definitely not the best the artistic team and technical team could do. It's the best they could do with the hardware at hand, or it fell in the good enough category. I think it's wonderful. But I think on the PS5 and on the next Xbox, we can expect another revolutionary jump. It's less obvious as the generations go by, but I think the story of video game water is amazing. I mean, we started with just flat planes and squares, then bang, interactive, artistic, then bang, realistic, large volumes, and then just a combination and peak of everything. So yeah, look, I hope you enjoyed this little unique video. I love water in my video games. I think it's such a, I'm not going to say underappreciated aspect, but it's something which I always focus on. You know how you have some people who are really focused on resolution, or they're focused on certain graphical effects. I am all about the water, and my friends can back me up that the first time I played Assassin's Creed, this whole big open world everywhere, what did I do? I ignored the missions, I ignored the people trying to kill me, I ignored the tutorial, I ran directly to the right, and I kept going until I hit the water, because that's what I want. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. You've been watching Gaming My Whole Life. You have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. And I will see you next time. Thank you.